Welcome to the Witchy Work Wishes podcast, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. Welcome to Witchy Work Wishes. I am your host, Charlene, and today we are talking about the September celebration of Mabon. But first, I like to pull some things I did over the weekend to help with my own personal craft. And I did a bunch of pre-planning this past weekend for this upcoming weekend. Specifically because I am traveling tomorrow and get to spend this upcoming weekend with my boys. It will be a new moon on Friday, and I wanted to plan for something fun and witchy that I can do for them and also with them. So I am bringing my recording equipment so we can possibly do an episode with the three of us. I sure had fun with the one I did with my older son not too long ago, and I really liked hearing his perspective on the witchy side of my life. I would love to open the floor up to my younger son and get his take on it too. Now I have the episode, if it does work, to be slated and called Sons of a Witch. Because how could I not, right? I have to call it that. A fun play on words, but we'll see if I can actually make an episode in opening up the mic for a free-flowing conversation with both of them. Episode or not, I am going to take full advantage of the new moon happening on Friday, since I get to be with both of them for it. Now, my 5 little fluffy foster kittens had a big move this weekend, starting the transition from bottle feeding to self-feeding from a tiny little bowl. May not seem significant if you are not in the kitten foster world, but it does mean I now get to sleep through the night. The past week and a half, I was only getting up once to bottle feed around 2 a.m., but now, with them a little bit older, I am able to sleep through the night because the middle of the night feedings are gone. Of course, after setting a 2 a.m. alarm for weeks on end, on Saturday I naturally woke up in the middle of the night. But guess what time the clock said? It was 3:33. And what are the chances of that? I've had some other number patterns coming up in the middle of the night, of course, but to wake up and look at the clock which says 3:33 means something to me. Now in numerology, 333 is all about being on the right course, or I think that's what it means. But I definitely want to do a full podcast about numerology, and hopefully I get to invite a guest who can guide us through some of the basics in understanding the number sequences. But either way, for the fluffy kittens, going through the night on their own is a big step for both them and for me. Now they are getting bigger now too, physically, with all of them, I think, coming in over a pound, some closer to 1.5 pounds. Now usually around 8 or 9 weeks of age, they are in that 2-pound range, and they end up going back to the shelter to be spayed and neutered and adopted. And I'm super happy that 3 of my little fosters are already spoken for. That really makes me so very, very happy. So really this past weekend, I spent getting organized. There was a bunch happening this week for me, and I wanted to make sure my suitcase was packed with everything I needed for my 2 boys and the new moon that we're going to be celebrating together on Friday. I'm also going to bring my 2 decks with me, my Animal Oracle deck and my Crow Tarot deck, just so the 3 of us can do a card pull together. I'm just so excited to see both of them and spend the weekend hanging out together. So I did do a card pull for myself this week, just to focus my energy on what I need to kind of be thinking of while I'm getting ready. So I went to my Animal Oracle deck for guidance, and I pulled the Nightingale Spirit, which says love is all around. In the darkness of night, Nightingale Spirit sings her song of love and hope, a harbinger of dawn to remind you that the sun will rise again soon. You are so loved, and the illumination song of the Nightingale Spirit calls you to a new level of self-awareness and connection with the light. Yes, there is shadow and darkness, but love and prosperity exist everywhere, even in the seemingly emptiness of space, darkness, and a starless night. Hearken to hear the message, letting the music of the Nightingale song remind you that love is all around. Feel it and trust in tomorrow's light, renewing your ability to recognize that the spaces that appear empty are filled with love and abundance. Illumination will soon happen. That's a nice card, a good reminder of the balance needed, both the light and the dark. Without knowing one, you certainly cannot know and appreciate the other. All right, well, our moon this week, our beautiful moon, we have a dark moon tomorrow. And as you well know, after listening to the moon series, this is one of my favorite times. I know Annika and I got a bit giggly out of our big black candle idea, but if you have one, now is a great time to use it, along with spells and workings and divination and communication with spirits, necromancy, the 3 beautiful phases, of course. This is time to work with the crone energy. So the dark moon is all about retreating and about looking inward. It's about shadow work. We're nice and slow and regrouping our energy with clarity right now and thinking about how best to move forward with the new moon that comes next. And our new moon is on Friday and Saturday. It's when, the moon has her first little sliver of new light. All right, let's jump into today's podcast all about Mabon. And if there is an ad to run, it will pop up real quick, and then we'll go right into our podcast for today. Well, it's September, and with September comes Mabon that is just around the corner. And for us working witches, we know quarter 3 is wrapping up. Now, depending on what your career path is or your current base of employment, things might be slowing down a little bit as we come into October, November, and December. Or, especially if you're in the retail world, things are getting ready to ramp up with the shopping season approaching. So this also happens to be a time of the year when many of us start to get that little glimmer in our eyes. We know fall is almost here, as well as our time of the year. I know that's a generalization, so I'll speak to what I know for sure. It is my time of the year, and it always has been. I am not a summer girl. Even though that's when my birthday does in fact happen, I could honestly just skip over July, August, and September for the most part. Or at least skip over the summer heat. Now, summer is the time when my house and my office decorations are at their thinnest. And towards the end of summer, right where we are now, I get a little glimpse of hope and a spark of energy for what is to come. And really, Mabon for me launches all of this. If you have Welsh or Celtic ties, your senses are probably tingling right now. Mabon is our second equinox and our second harvest celebration. You may have heard it also called the Witches' Thanksgiving, but either way, Mabon on our Western Hemisphere calendar will be happening on September 23rd this year of 2023, which happens to fall on a Saturday. And this weekend celebration, of course, works perfectly for the Monday through Friday working witch. So that said, we can celebrate, of course, all week long and into the weekend with the amazing energy that Mabon brings. So Mabon is a pagan holiday, and it is one of the Sabbats on the Wheel of the Year, and it is directly tied to harvest season. Of course, our first harvest celebration was Lunasa, but this harvest celebration is tied, I think, more to the garden, which is why it is more closely related or, like associated with witchcraft. That's a personal opinion there, but that's what I'm thinking. This time of year, though, we are entering the crone phase of the season and really, gathering the last of what is to be harvested from our crops. This is also the autumn equinox. And hold tight, there is one more and one final harvest coming this year, which is called Samhain. So Samhain actually means end of summer, and it brings a bunch of fun stuff with it that we all know and are very anxiously awaiting. But for now, it's all about Mabon. So Mabon really is about three main things. It's about balance, it's about harvest, and it's about slowing down. And if the moon cycle was broken out into like a calendar year or, over the calendar year, it really would be starting the waning phase right now. We are having our second harvest. And just like, coming off of a full moon when you're celebrating all your harvest stuff, we need to be thankful and focus on balance, which the equinox is all about. Our day is equal to our night, and the September equinox launches our fall season. All right, so let's do some of the, general and basic things for Mabon first. Colors, think of harvest and fall colors here. We want to pull and work with our yellows, our oranges, and our reds, our colors of brown, gold, even tones of green. Now, animals, it's all about the blackbirds right now. Woohoo! I wish they were chiming in. It's also all about the eagles. It's about owls. It's about the wolf and stags, even wild geese right now. For our mythical creatures, fall is the time for gnomes. And just saying that makes me giggle, right? No wonder this is our time of the year. Okay, so for herbs, Mabon is about cinnamon. Mabon is about cinnamon. And Mabon is about cinnamon. Okay, just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, it's also about cloves, sage, rosemary, apples and more apples, pine, maple, pears, frankincense, myrrh, thistle, tobacco, yarrow, and basil. Now for crystals, we'll want to use our citrine, our amber, tiger's eye, clear quartz, smoky quartz too, aventurine, lapis lazuli, and sapphire. And now is a good time for obsidian along with hematite. Our symbols for Mabon are going to be the adorable little acorns, pine cones, which I love, cinnamon sticks, which I also love, grains from harvest, cornucopia, of course, and apples. So for our deities, first and foremost, the Welsh god Mabon. The god Mabon is both the oldest and the youngest of gods, representing a balance, just like the fall equinox, the halfway point when light and dark are equal. So Mabon is known to protect wild animals in the forest. We also have Persephone, who is a Greek goddess, also the daughter of Zeus. She is known as the queen of the underworld, who I believe was married to Hades. We also have Demeter, another Greek goddess of agriculture, fertility, and the cycle of life and death, who I believe is Persephone's mother. So if you follow the Greek deities, Demeter is one of the original 12 Olympians. All right, so what are we doing in the witchcraft community for Mabon? Well, it really is considered the witches' Thanksgiving, right? But there are a bunch of things we can do for Mabon in addition to celebrating the second harvest and being thankful. But let's start with those two things first, which is Thanksgiving. Now, in the United States, Thanksgiving is celebrated by many in November, right? And controversy aside, the images of pilgrims and indigenous people sitting side by side is probably not realistic. Further, if we think about it, November is not harvest season. In fact, the time to harvest crops and garden goodies has long passed by the time the end of November comes around. But September, well, that is harvest season and the second harvest of the year. So this is a much more realistic time to celebrate and be thankful for all we have grown and stored away for the cold winter months that are near. So Witches' Thanksgiving really is just that. Now our first harvest was all about grains and ground fruit, but our second harvest, Mabon, is all about harvesting the fruit on trees. And if apples had a season, and they do, it's now. Mabon foods to help you host an amazing Witches' Thanksgiving will be anything with apples, with cider, apple pies, pumpkins, grains, and breads, garden herbs, things like that. Think of adding your harvested potatoes, carrots, and onions now too. And if you are able to have a bonfire or a kitchen simmer pot going on the 23rd, that is another great way to celebrate if feasting maybe is not on the ticket for you. All right, things to do for Mabon. Now, if kitchen witchcraft speaks to you like it does to me, anything made with special intentions for Mabon are going to bring energy to our craft. But right now, it's all about apples, cloves, pumpkin, and cinnamon in my home. So the apple itself has a deep history with witchcraft as they tangle and tie love, health, immortality, and fertility into our practice. Now, with the Celts and the Druids, Irish law, like really old Irish law, said it was punishable by death if an apple tree was cut down. That is how important and sacred the apple was to their culture. Now, both the Celtic underworld and the Greek underworld had an apple tree as a significant symbol. I believe for the Irish, the apple tree gave food to the dead during those cold winter months. And with the Greeks, Hades and Persephone used an apple branch to enter the realm of the gods. So back in medieval times, farmers who grew apples would hold ceremonies to invoke a full, successful harvest. Now, love spells are all about apples. Well, okay, not all of them, of course, but apples are certainly a big part of them. And if you are doing any magic that actually calls for the use of blood, I believe you can substitute apple cider for it. But for love and romance, apples and all parts of the apple tree, really, the wood, the leaves, the fruit, the flowers, all of it can be used in spells. Now, for health, we know the saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? Well, apples are a part of a bunch of herbal recipes for health. And apples are said to help with keeping our liver healthy, our gums healthy, and even our guts healthy. And I don't know about you, but when I was little and got sick, applesauce was usually on the menu along with saltine crackers and ginger ale. Now, the significance of the apple was not just held to the Celtic and Greek traditions or used back in medieval times. The Norse also valued apples because they believed it kept the gods from aging and held a special spot in their underworld too. I think Freya and Hel, who is the queen of the Norse underworld, have apples as part of their goddess symbols. Now, apples were associated with food for the immortals across many cultures. Why? Well, it has a lot to do with that beautiful five-pointed star that's in the middle of every apple. Of course, we can do magic with apples at any time of the year, right? It just depends on what you're drumming up at the time. But think of the extra energy we have right now with Mabon and apple season. It's strong. And I'm all about having things added naturally to give my workings an extra punch. So with apple season comes a great time for spells with apples. And that special apple pentagram? Well, it represents or can represent the four elements and the spirit. Now, the element of earth is about the material world, right? It's our Mother Earth. Air is all about our ideas and our conscience, the mental realm. Fire is our energy and our potential. Water is all about our emotions and the astral world, our unconscious. And then spirit is what oversees it all, keeping everything in check and flowing correctly. So that special apple pentagram can also represent the five senses, with the circle around it being the sixth sense. Let's see, the pentagram can represent a bunch of things in nature, and it does. Many of our witchy garden herbs have the 5-point theme to them with their 5 petals or 5 leaves. Even Da Vinci used the 5 points in his human proportion drawing. And of course, there's a famous apple in the biblical story of Adam and Eve. One of my favorite childhood books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, has the apple tree front and center as the wardrobe is made from a magical apple tree. And let's not forget the famous apple handed to Snow White. So apples are significant in so many cultures. The Greeks knew apples to be about love, fertility, and beauty. The Celtic culture knew apples to be about immortality and the underworld. The Norse tied eternal life, rejuvenation, and youth with apples. The Chinese culture knew apples to be about beauty and peace. And the Christian culture knew apples to be about temptation and sin. So what can we do with apples in our magical witchcraft world? Well, the first one I have is apple garlands. And, we're going to tie that 5-pointed star that naturally forms in the middle of every apple to this. Of course, you're going to want to cut your apple widthwise so you can see that 5-pointed star, and then string the pieces of apple together so that the 5-point star in the middle shows on each one. Now, this garland can be added to our witchy spaces, to our altars, or even in the office as a great fall decoration. All right, second, we love our number 13, right? Well, if you have your own garden, after you have completed your last harvest, bury 13 apple tree leaves in your soil to help ensure a good harvest next year. 3, I've got bake a fresh apple pie. Now, I like mine a bit more rustic with nice big chunks of apples. and a nice buttery crumble streusel topping instead of that, second pastry pie on top. Now, I've been making apple pies for a very long time and really don't have a set recipe that I use anymore. I kind of just go off of memory and make it organically. But the rolled out dough for the crust is something that has been adjusted over the years for me. When I lived in the mountains, everything cooked and baked differently with the altitude. But now on coast level again, it's kind of back to basics. And since this is all about witchy work wishes, I will definitely be tying in my kitchen witchcraft with my own personal office and baking a Mabon apple pie for my employees. Number 4, I've got hot apple cider. Now, this is another great kitchen witchcraft project that I'll be doing this year, and something that I can bring in and balance with my corporate world. I just got to figure a way to keep it warm all day. Probably crock-pot. Okay, 5, I've got cored out apples with fall candles. This one's super cute. And it is one great way to bridge kind of our fire magic with the apple season and Mabon. It certainly is a beautiful way to decorate too, especially if you have that apple garland we just talked about hanging somewhere close to it. The apple candles will definitely complement them perfectly. I don't know if I will have time to make apple butter this year, but I've got it as number 6. But since I'm traveling, I probably will try to do it when I come back. Apple season will last for a while through Samhain, so it is on my list for sure this year either way, at some point. And oh gosh, the childhood memories that I have with fresh homemade bread, toasted with my mom's homemade apple butter on top. Oh, yes please. Okay, so those are 6 kind of great basic ways to get going with Mabon, but we want to add our magical touches to each of them, right? Let's start with cinnamon. This amazing spice that I love so much goes way, way back with connections to the spirit world and protection, as I think it was first found like in an old Egyptian tomb, like 200 BC old Egyptian tomb, as part of their mummification process. Now, for us today, it is still all about protection and connection to the spirit world. But also, cinnamon is about strength. It's used to amplify our spells. It's about love, money, and health. Now, personally, I use cinnamon all year long. I add it to my coffee as part of my nightly prep for the next morning. And the ritual chant I say while getting it ready is, I love myself, I love my boys, I love my family, and I love my business. So may it be. And yes, that is 4 scoops of freshly grounded coffee beans and 1/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon. It's too much. And it is on my immediate goal list to wean off a good amount of my coffee consumption. But for me, I use cinnamon in my coffee and many of my spells all year long. Now, as we are coming into fall season, this second equinox of our calendar year, and just as much as it's apple season, it is cinnamon season too. With everything I just listed, I would add cinnamon and a spell to each of them. What type of spell? That depends on what you're looking for. Protection? Yes, please. Cinnamon is all about protection. It helps guard us. It guards our homes, helps with negative energy, as well as being a nice veil of spiritual protection. Love? Always. I use this property in my witchy baking often, and cinnamon is the perfect companion for it. Cinnamon attracts love. It attracts romance and passion. It's comforting, like a blanket of love for our family and friends. And it's strong. Add cinnamon when you need strength added to your workings. This goes for energy and motivation too. Cinnamon is love. What about wealth and abundance? Oh yeah, cinnamon is great here. So adding a splash to your spell for prosperity will enhance your energy. Spiritually? Absolutely. Cinnamon has close ties to divination and is known to help us with spiritual connections. All right, cinnamon itself, well, it's associated with the fire element and the sun. It's tied to Thursday, which is Thor's Day. It's a masculine energy, and it's a strong energy. Now, for zodiac signs, cinnamon corresponds to Aries, Leo, and Capricorn, I believe. So now, while cinnamon is going to help with our garlands, our leaf planting, our apple pies, our apple cider making, our apple candles and fall baking, there are many ways we can incorporate cinnamon into our craft. Now, I mentioned using the Super Blue Moon water and the essential cinnamon oil from doTERRA called On Guard to make a roller ball of protection for myself, which, by the way, I've been loving, like just loving. I'm using sigil work with it while applying it to my body before heading out for the day, and honestly, I'm loving every step of it. So much so, in fact, I will be making and giving one to each of my boys this coming weekend so they can be protected too. But back to cinnamon. We can use cinnamon in other ways as well. So first I've got sprinkle it around our home. Now, I know some witches use cinnamon in their front door with some first of the month workings. I personally don't do that one, but I do know it's super popular right now. Cinnamon does purify, it protects, so I think using it in our homes in general is going to be good. Now, if you have a green thumb, or maybe you are testing your hand at houseplants, adding cinnamon, just a dash, just a tiny little dash to the water before you feed them is wonderful. Now, this goes for our office plants too. It will help purify and protect them just as it does our home. Now, how big is your wallet? Can you fit a cinnamon stick in it? Even if it's just a little tiny stick. Well, not only will your wallet smell good, you will also be attracting more money. I'll be sure to say a good little spell before adding it, so your intentions are connected. But this use of cinnamon is a great way to tie into the prosperity factor that the spice itself has. And of course, add cinnamon to your workings. It can be added to candles, to oils, to simmer pots, to soil. It can be used with incense and infusion to many of our potions to help enhance the spell. Now, I have even used a cinnamon stick to cleanse a space in my office. It helps, like all around helps. Okay, that might have been a little tangent on cinnamon, but most of us love it, right? All year long. And as long as I'm doing side notes here or tangents, I personally love cloves and spell work. Now, just like cinnamon is about protection, love, and prosperity, so are cloves. And just like adding a small cinnamon stick to your wallet will bring money to you, a tiny clove will work just as well, smell equally good, and bring just as much abundance and wealth to your pocket as a cinnamon stick will. But let's go back to Mabon and the launch of our fall season. Cinnamon is a perfect addition to anything with apples, to many of our spells, and much of our personal crafts this time of year. But during this time of year, what are we looking to for energy? Well, I think Mabon really is about balance. And we know it is the time of Libra, and those faithful scales that show the balance with everything. And this may seem like, something that should be equal at all times, but, that's just not realistic. Balance to me means both sides of the scale, both sides of the pendulum, the light and the dark, the sun and the moon, the feminine and the masculine. Both sides of everything is needed for us to be complete. And while I will never make political statements in this podcast, I will quickly say both sides are needed. I feel there is value in everyone and everything. So think about animals and wildlife. Most people do not like possums, right? But they're so very needed in our communities as they rid our spaces of ticks. Think about how scary some people view vultures to be. But they help us. They help us keep our earth tidy by being the cleanup crew. Think about how hard it is to see a wildfire burn. And not like a man-set fire like arson or something, but, natural ones. I mean, they're all hard to look at. That's not what I meant, but you know what I mean. They're needed. They're needed to help keep our ecosystems healthy. There is a yin and yang in every situation. All parts are needed to balance life. And as humans, we are going to go through some shit, some really dark and scary times. And as dark and scary as they are, we need to experience them, to understand them, to grow and mature from them, to have a balanced life. It's just how it is. And now at Mabon, nature is at its own balance. Equal day and equal night. We know it's going to be very dark soon, and we know it was all about the sun all summer long. The pendulum swings to both sides. But right now, with Mabon, it's resting evenly in the middle. It's equal. Now, for the office and my witchy work wishes, I am going to celebrate the equinox the fall solstice, and Mabon with decorations, with apples, and baking from my witchy kitchen, so my office smells amazing and my staff have nice, full bellies of homemade goodies that I made with love and lots of powerful intentions. So with that, I do have a Mabon poem for today's episode. I'm going to go grab it, and I will be right back. All right, I've got a quick poem that I wrote for today's podcast, all about Mabon, so here we go. Cinnamon spells and living well, in a balanced life I seek. I call to you the autumn hue of mystery and mystique. As I stir my roux with intentions to add my magical flower, I take this time to make it mine, to grow in strength and power. The blackbird is graciously heard this fall September day. She flies and glides her magical wings over golden bales of hay. I bake and make my witchy food with mystery and technique. And with my spells, the autumn bells are crafty and unique. Balance time with this Mabon rhyme in the autumn's hue was asked. And so it was, and justly does, protect the spells I cast. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope everyone has a great rest of the work week, a wonderful new moon over the weekend, and I'll talk with you next week. Thank you for joining me today at Witchy Work Wishes, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. For more information and additional content, please visit me online at witchyworkwishes.com. If you want to send me a personal note, please email me at info@witchyworkwishes.com. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Witchy Work Wishes.